Springs, where Senator Michael Bennet is hosting a town hall to field questions from his constituents. You're watching live coverage on C-SPAN.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is this on? Can you hear? Yeah. Thank you for being here tonight. I can't tell you how grateful I am. Give yourselves a round of applause for being out here for our democracy. Madam Superintendent, where did you go? Thank you very much for having us here tonight and for your incredible students. And I couldn't get in here, really. I got here a little bit early, but she kept telling me about all the initiatives that they're pursuing here in the school district. We barely got out on the stage. But thank you for what you're doing. You know, maybe I'll start just by saying a word or two, if that's okay, and then we're going to do Q&A here, and we're going to pick you randomly out of that bunny head that's over there on the stage. And I want us to have as robust a conversation as we can have and as honest a conversation as we can have. I think it's really, really important. And for me, you know, my tendency is always to evaluate the work we're doing in Washington based on how we're doing for the kids I used to work for in the Denver public schools and the kids all over rural Colorado for that matter. And unfortunately, there are a lot of days when I feel like we're not working very well for them. And it's important to do it. If I travel the state of Colorado, I can tell you, I mean, I do travel the state of Colorado, I can tell you when I do, that in every county I go, there's a feeling that people have that no matter how hard you work, you really can't get ahead. And people are feeling like their kids are not going to live as good a life as the life they live. I mean, it is harder and harder for anybody to imagine that their kids, for example, will be able to afford a house in the neighborhood in which they live. That's true all over our state, and I think it's true across the country where people feel like the economy, even when it's grown, has grown mostly for the people at the very top and not so much for everybody else. And it's true. And it's harder and harder to afford a middle-class life. The families that I used to work for in Denver, where most of the kids were kids of color, most of the kids were kids living on free and reduced lunch or who were on free and reduced lunch in the schools, no matter how hard their parents worked, and their parents worked really, really hard, often 2 and 3 jobs, they couldn't get their kids out of poverty. And that's the reflection of an economy that for a lot of years in America just hasn't had the economic mobility that we came to expect after World War II. And I think when people were looking at this election, you know, a lot of people, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why people voted for Donald Trump, but I think one of the reasons was that they were so upset with the way the economy was working that they thought neither party had really done anything all that useful for them. And so their view was, let's send this agent of chaos to Washington, D.C. I mean, no one is surprised with the chaos, I hope, in this auditorium. And on some level, nobody's really that surprised with the corruption either, because Donald Trump's been sort of honest about that. You know, he makes the argument that, of course I'm corrupt, he says, but I'm not as corrupt as the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and so that's why you should send me to Washington, D.C. And I think we probably can do better than that. And I do believe there are a lot of people that are now worried about what is going to happen to our democracy, what's going to happen to the rule of law, What's going to happen to the separation of powers? What's going to happen to freedom of the press? What's going to happen to all of the principles that this country was founded on, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican? What's going to happen for the fight for freedom in Ukraine? What is going to happen there? The fight for democracy. The fight for democracy, the fight for the West. Those are the questions people are asking. And I know we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. And I know there's a temptation also to try to respond to every single thing that's happening every second of every day. I travel, today I was in Pueblo and I spent some time there and then came up here. I was in Estes Park and going over to Greeley and then to Jeffco in the last couple of days, and every 5 seconds I have another text message from my mom, you know. I have another email from my mom. So if you run into Susie Bennet, tell her I'm getting her text messages, I'm getting her emails, I'm getting all the articles that she's forwarding me saying, can you believe this? Can you believe this? About the Department of Education today. I think she sent me 20 things, maybe. So please tell her I'm registering it, even though I haven't replied. But I think it is important for us to be thinking strategically about all of this. And one thing I just want to leave you with before we start is the idea that there are some things that we need to do in America. Again, we have to create an economy that when it grows for everybody, not just the people at the very top. We need to create, finally, like every other industrialized country in the world has, a healthcare system that actually provides healthcare as a right to the American people. And mental health care, especially to our kids who are struggling across the state of Colorado. We have to make sure, and I'll say this on the day that the Department of Education apparently is being dismantled, we have to make sure that the zip code kids are born into doesn't define the education that they have. And that kids who graduate from high school, like Harrison, are able, if they don't go to college, to earn a living wage and support a family, not just the minimum wage. This country can lead the entire world when it comes to energy and climate change. We can do that here in the United States of America. And we can create an immigration system in America, again, that reflects our history as a nation of immigrants and our commitment to the rule of law. We can do all of that. But as long as we are worried about whether or not Canada is going to become the 51st state, you know, or the president's going to build hotels in Gaza, or Greenland is going to become part of our country, you know, we're going to be distracted from the stuff that we actually have to get done in this country. And I mention that not because what we're going to talk about isn't important tonight, and all those texts and emails that my mom sent me aren't important tonight, but I do want to make sure that we also don't get distracted from the main stuff that we've got to be focused on. And the things that are going to, because you know what? Here's what happens in democracy since basically the dawn of time. If people lose a sense of economic opportunity for themselves and their families, inevitably, that's when somebody shows up and says, as President Trump did, I alone can fix it. You don't need a democracy. You don't need the rule of law. You should expect your public sector and your private sector to be hopelessly corrupt, hopelessly bankrupt, and you're sort of a sucker if you don't believe that. I think the kids at Harrison High School deserve much, much better than that out of us. And that's why we're here tonight. That's why we're here tonight. And I'm telling you this, no matter how upset I am, no matter how frustrated and angry I am, which I am all those things, I am inspired by the fact that you are here tonight. I am gratified by the fact that you are here tonight. And I am going to leave, no matter what happens tonight, feeling more positive about where we're headed, and I want to thank all of you for that. Thank you for being here tonight. All right, John. So we're going to call 2 questions at a time, and then we'll find you with a microphone, and we'll try to get through it as fast as we can.
I'm going to call the last 4 numbers of each ticket. So the last 4 numbers.
Put your microphone up a little. There you go.
The first question is going to be 1988. That's 1988. The second question is going to be 1896. That's 1896.
Hi, Senator Bennet. My question is, what can the Senate and the Congress do now with regard to our alliances, our friendship with Ukraine and NATO? What can we continue to do even though things aren't under the Democratic control in the Congress? What can we do to counteract Trump's actions in that realm?
Thank you.
And also the North American trade agreements and things like that.
Thank you very much for the question. I've spent a ton of time on this, in part because my mom was born in Warsaw in 1938. That's the worst place in the world to be born, a Polish Jew, which she was. And she and her parents were the only people, and she and her parents and an aunt were the only people that survived the Holocaust. So I have a personal interest in this, and I've been fighting on this for the last 3 years. Weirdly, I'll mention with Mitch McConnell, who's actually been a leader on making sure that we fulfill our commitments to Ukraine. And so, first of all, I think it's important for us to remind the American people of what's going on in this war. I lost you, the person who asked the question. There you are. Because the president keeps going around saying we have this big debt that we owe Ukraine because Ukraine has used our weapons. And there's no doubt that the American people have been generous in the money and the material that we've sent to Ukraine. That's true. But the entire world owes Ukraine a debt for the 400,000 casualties they have had on the front lines of this war, for the people that they have lost. If you go to Ukraine, I was just there, in every single part of that country, there are graveyards with fresh graves that have been dug, with flowers on the top of them, for people who have given their lives, not just for Ukraine, but for democracy and for freedom all over the world. That's why we have so many allies in this battle, not just in Europe, but in Southeast Asia as well. One thing that I've done personally is it was a couple of weeks ago, I was out there raging on the floor about the fact that President Trump had said the Ukrainians had started this war. And that is false. And for that thought experiment to matter to you, I just want to think about this. Imagine if China invaded Taiwan. That's of great concern to a lot of people. If China invaded Taiwan and we had a president who said Taiwan invaded China, it was telling the American people that that's how that war started. That is what we are hearing today from our president on this subject, and it is really important for us to make sure the American people are informed about this war, how it started, and how people came together to fight it. I was on the floor after that rageful speech the next week with 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, this is an answer to your question, who were standing there in a bipartisan way talking about how important this alliance is and how important it's been since basically the World War II. And when we set up the post-World War II order, that until this moment in time, we have been the leader of. And the importance to the American people of continuing the alliances that you are talking about. This president ran on the idea of America first. I don't think there's anything America first about putting us at the end of the line when it comes to our national security, when it comes to our international relationships. And we are going to need Republican colleagues in the Senate to continue to step up the way 4 of them were willing to do it last week. And that will, in the end, make a difference, I think. I'm on the Intelligence Committee as well, where we meet in secret, and in theory, anyway, you're supposed to act a little bit less like a jackass if you're there behind closed doors because the cameras aren't on. And in general, that's true. That's a bipartisan group of people as well that I think can provide the kind of institutional support that you're talking about from the Senate on these matters of war and peace, which is critically important. So thank you for that question. Where's the second question? Or did we have a second question? Did I already wear you out? Can I say thank or hello to Kevin, who's sitting in the front? Hello, Kevin. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, man.
Hopefully they call my number.
Well, let's see. There's no, if it were up to me, I'd call you on you all night, but that's not the way it works. What's next?
The next two questions are going to be 1874, that's 1874, and 1902. 1902.
Here's one here. Thank you. Thank you. And do we have two people who are looking? Okay, great. Wow, that's unbelievable. It's not Kevin,
Wow.
but it's the person right behind Kevin.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Well, I'm not personally known to you, Michael,
That's okay.
but I feel like I just learned something wonderful. I share the Jewish ancestry of your mother. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Had no idea, and I liked you anyway.
Thank you.
And I came here not with a question, and so I won't take much time. I came here to be here and to thank you for being an honest politician who speaks from his heart and really does good things. I have to admit, and I apologize for this, I didn't really know that you were an educator before, and so you just win my heart in all kinds of ways, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to offer my thanks as well, particularly that you're here in person, having just attended. Another town hall. These are hard, and we appreciate you being here. My question really has to do with, I'm going to try to squeeze two of them in here. The young man who talked about Pell Grants and the Department of Education and the fact that it is now apparently got a big target on its back.
Yep.
As a former school board member, apparently, you understand the importance of the Department of Education. Not that they are making decisions about our curriculum or anything that else should be under local control,
right,
but they provide so much to in the way of support for students and teachers and particularly people with disabilities or
right,
who need help in that way. How can you and how can we help with that?
Yep.
The other question I would have really loops back around to corporate influence in our electoral system. What can be done?
What are you talking about?
No, come
I'm just
on.
kidding.
You know what I'm talking about.
I'm kidding.
You know
I
what
don't-
I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What can be done to dismantle Citizens
Sure.
United?
Absolutely. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. So let me take the second one first. We should look, there are other generations of Americans who have detected moments when our Constitution actually needed updating, and they changed it. For example, to create the self-evident proposition that women should have the right to vote. By the way, that happened after 100 years of women fighting for the right to vote in this country. And so if you're here tonight to give up, you better think about those women. They didn't give up, and women have a right to vote in America as a result of that. We should amend our Constitution to get rid of Citizens United. That's what we should do. We should do it. And I don't know about you, but it is so brazen. I thought it was brazen to watch Elon Musk walking around Pennsylvania during the election, basically with, I don't know, $100, are there $1,000 bills? I don't know, but $100 bills falling out of his pockets, paying people and, to support President Trump in his reelection. And I forget how much he actually spent in Pennsylvania. Now he's wandering around the Treasury Department, the Department of Education, all that kind of stuff. By the way, he makes more money in a second than a school teacher does in a year, I think. That's pretty unbelievable. I doubt he has much idea of what's going on in schools and classrooms in this country. And you know that there was an article 2 weeks ago that said that President Trump has already raised $500 million from that money, that corrupt money that you're talking about, for the congressional elections that are coming up 2 years from now. And you know that Elon Musk is putting money into this Wisconsin Supreme Court race that's so important. So, you can answer that by making telephone calls into Wisconsin to make sure people get out and vote. And ultimately, we've got to overcome Citizens United, and we have to change that. And I think at a minimum, and we don't need to change the Constitution to do this, we should pass laws at every level of government to require disclosure of all this money so we know who's actually spending it. Now, let me give you a little bit of it might be an unusual answer on the school stuff. I was the superintendent of the Denver Public Schools. We ran a reform effort there for years and years and years. They've just come up with a study. They just did a study of the work that I did, and the guy that was my successor, who was actually there for 10 years, he deserves most of the credit. But in that school district, we had the highest number of kids that were on free and reduced lunch in Colorado. The students in Denver, if you had been a student in our school district during that reform, you got 2 years of additional schooling because you were in our school district versus any other school district in the state of Colorado because of the work we did with our teachers and our principals and our parents to change what we were doing. And now we have a president who has decided in a country where parents are more worried than ever about whether their kids are able to tell the difference between right or wrong, he has now put the head of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in there as the Secretary of Education to begin with, and then he says, we're going to shut it down. I don't want to go back to a time, you mentioned special needs kids, when they are warehoused in facilities where they never get the chance to be integrated into the rest of the school community, to be able to have a shot at a fair education. That has been one of the critical things that the Department of Education has done. I mentioned Title I, the money for poorest kids in our society. That also comes through that Department of Education. And the Pell Grants that our Harrison High student mentioned, that's so important too. We have to change that system. We have to make it work better, but dismantling it is not the answer. But even beyond that, and here's why it is so catastrophic in my mind that this guy is President of the United States, it's not what he's doing specifically in the case of this, but it's the fact that America needs to revolutionize our system of public education in this country. We have to drag our system from the 17th century into the 21st century. That's what we should be doing. And we should have a president who's fighting to make sure that every kid in America has access to early childhood education, as an example. We should be making sure that we have a president who is ensuring that every kid that graduates from high school in this country has the skills to earn a living wage, not just the minimum wage. And that if you go to college, you can go to college and not bankrupt yourself or bankrupt your family. That's what we should be focused on. So it's a reminder not just of what happened today and the headlines of today. It's a reminder of the long-term costs of having somebody in there who just doesn't care about what's happening to the kids. And I am sure, I have no doubt, that the kids in my old school district And the kids that are living in rural Colorado are completely invisible to these Doge characters and to, they don't have any idea. And we need to make sure that we do everything we can to protect them, to support them, to make sure that even while this craziness is going on in Washington, D.C., we're doing everything we can right here to make sure we're delivering the highest quality education we can for the kids that go to school at Harrison and throughout this district.
Next two questions, and when I call your number, if you could stand and wave so we can make sure to find you with the microphone. It's going to be 1839 and 1972. That's 1839 and 1972.
All right.
I was the second, but can I go first?
Yeah, whatever, however you want to. No fighting. Go ahead.
I have two suggestions for you, sir, and thank you very much for doing this in person.
Thanks.
I don't believe that our message, the opposition message to President Trump, is getting out. I think that we, as people who don't support Trump, but I don't want to call us Democrats, because I have friends who are Republicans who are just as appalled as I am, I don't think we are doing a very good job. I think my suggestion would be some type of press conference or something to alternate and provide different content, because I think there's not a whole lot we can do about Fox News. I totally get that. But I think we can provide different content and get our message out, because I honestly don't think our message is getting out.
Yep.
My second suggestion is that I don't believe this is really, well, outside of Washington. Within Washington, it is a Democrat versus Republican issue. It's always a zero-sum game. I lived in Washington and worked federal government for many years. I understand that. But in the rest of the country, I think this is a cult of Trump versus the rest of the people who are sane. And I don't think, and I wouldn't use the word MAGA because I think that's their word, but I honestly think we should fight this fight and use the words of the cult of Trump, the whatever of Trump, and versus the rest of us. Because like I said, even though right now there are a lot of Republicans in Washington who are helping and supporting him, only 33% of the voting public voted for him. This is a cult of Trump. He's not a Republican, no more than I'm Snow White. He's just Donald Trump. And there's the cult of Trump versus the rest of us. And I think that's the language we should argue this in.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, there's so much in your question. First of all, one thing you mentioned is you were a federal employee. And I want to say there are 60,000 federal employees in Colorado, and we should give them a round of applause for their public service and for their work. And we are battling, and we have to battle to make sure that people back there understand the real costs. I am sure that there is nobody in this room that doesn't think that every level of government can be reformed. Maybe there is. I think it needs to be. I just said that I think our schools need to be. I believe that. And I don't think there's anything that doesn't need to be changed, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And we're seeing the wrong way. He has put a target on the back of our federal employees. They are terrified by what he's doing. And we are losing out because, there's not, as you know, there's not a town or a city in Colorado, there's not a farm or a ranch that's not downstream from the rivers that start in our national forests. And yet we're laying off critical employees from the Forest Service. Just to take one example, right when the fire season is about to start. That is a crisis and a disaster. We've got to push back on that. You know what? I agree with you. I might get into a little bit of trouble by saying this, but I do think I mentioned earlier that I said, he was running on the platform, of course I'm corrupt, but I'm less corrupt than these two parties. In a sense, if you see it that way, it's kind of incidental that there was one that he happened to take over, the Republican Party. And he is showing that it's less about the historic commitments of that party, that it's an apparatus that is his personal apparatus. And if you don't believe me, consider whether or not what it would have taken for you to vote for Pete Hegseth to be the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America. Seriously, seriously. We are living, this is the heart of our, in many ways, El Paso County is the heart of our Defense Department. The heart of it, right here. What would it have taken? How many generals are there in this community that we would have rather had in that job than Pete Hegseth? And the reason why he did that was he wanted to show how dominant he is among that group of people. That's why he did it. And I also agree with you about, the failure of our message. We just went through this debacle last week, in the Senate, and it was never clear to the American people what we were fighting for. We need to be much clearer about that. And by the way, I don't blame Donald Trump for winning the election. I can't blame him for that. He ran for office. I do think the Democratic Party needs to think very hard about how we lost to this guy twice. The second time we lost to him, tells you it's not just a messaging problem. The second time we lost to him, he had already been the first president, the first president to take away a fundamental civil right from the American people since Reconstruction, a woman's right to choose. And yet we still couldn't beat him. Out of 330 million people, he should have been the one guy that we could have beaten because of what he had already done. So this is not going to be a problem we're going to solve in the next 10 minutes, but we do need to have a party that thinks deliberately and intentionally and strategically about the failures of communication we had in the last election, and manages to come up with a policy agenda and a political agenda that is future-oriented that the American people can embrace. I have no doubt that if we can do that, we're going to put Trumpism in the rearview mirror for all the reasons that you said. For all the reasons you said. Yes.
Good evening, Senator Bennet.
Hi.
My name is Kimberly Gold. I have a...
You brought your own fan club to the...
I have a request than a question. We have city council elections on April 1st in 12 days, and we have abysmal turnout every single election cycle. I was hoping you could give us some inspiring, action-oriented, encouraging wisdom on the trickle-down and trickle-up effect of local elections.
Yes, let me tell you something. I started my public career, believe it or not, as the chief of staff to the mayor of Denver, whose name at that time was a guy named John Hickenlooper. I don't have any idea whatever happened to that guy. But I believe very, very strongly that the work at the local level is the most important work that anybody can do. Anybody can do. And that's from the school board to the city council to the county commission. It's absolutely true. And it's one of the points I was trying to make earlier. You can't let this stuff in DC distract us from the work that has to be done at the local level. In fact, it should be a reason why, notwithstanding what's going on back there, we're doing everything we can to strengthen our democracy here at home, to make sure that people vote here at home, to make sure that we are passing ordinances and bills and statutes that help lift up people in Colorado to make sure that it is a place where people feel like their kids are going to have a chance to thrive and to stay here. You know, we can do that here. We don't need Donald Trump to do it. He can make that much more difficult. But there's a lot that we can do here at the local level. And there are a lot of reasons to believe that what you figure out to do here around affordable housing, just to take that as an example, or the delivery of mental health, or the way you approach questions of energy and water, could be models for the entire rest of the country. That's what it means to live in a federalist system, where you can transport something from one part of the country to another part of the country. So I am with you 100%. And I actually used to, when I first worked for Hickenlooper, my kids were really, really young, and I used to have to go to city council on Monday night. That was my job, to represent the mayor, and I got yelled at a lot at city council. And I remember one night I got home, my kids had been watching it on TV, and they had two questions for me. What did you do to make all those people mad at you? And how did you fit in that little box? All right, John.
Next two tickets are going to be 2047, 2047, and 1940. 1940.
I promise we picked the first row only.
I guess I kind of have two questions for you, if I could. My first one, because you were kind of talking...
Could you hold your microphone up?
Sorry, kind of talking about the Democratic Party needs to go in a different direction. What are your thoughts about Chuck Schumer having voted yes on the CR bill, and thoughts on him stepping down from leadership, because I don't believe he's made for this moment right now?
And what's your second question?
Totally different. It has to do with Gaza.
Go ahead. You might as well.
Bernie Sanders has a bill that he wants to bring up to Congress to put an arms embargo on Israel, who just 3 days ago killed 178 children in one night while they were sleeping in their tents. The U.S. has been complicit in sending money. Congress has voted to send weapons in, I think, violation of Leahy laws and international laws to an apartheid state that is plausibly carrying out a genocide. When are we going to stop supporting this? When are we going to say, no, we're not going to continue killing children and innocent people? They're talking 60,000 to 200,000 people dead from U.S. weapons. And this is something you and Hickenlooper have both supported for 16 months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you for both those questions. On the leadership question, it's not a secret that we've been having debates there about what the future should look like, and I did say last night, and I'll say again, that I think we should be looking at all the Democratic leadership, and that's not a new idea for me. I mean, I was the first senator after Joe Biden's terrible debate with Donald Trump to say that we were going to lose in a landslide if we didn't make a change, and I took no joy in that, by the way. We have a lot to thank Joe Biden for. We really do. We really do. Not the least of which was beating Donald Trump to begin with. And he also was critical to keeping Space Command here in El Paso County, which I'm grateful for. But that's, we should always be asking whether we're fielding the best team. And I don't have a more clear answer for you tonight. I do think that the Gaza situation is a tragic situation, and it is my hope that we will someday be in a place where we are able to get a two-state solution there that can put this period.
Flow of weapons, and they could stop killing people. And you're in a place where you could do it.
Yeah, and we obviously have a different point of view about that, and
that they're getting bombs dropped on their tents. That's not a different point of view. That's fact.
Yeah.
That's happening, and it's from weapons that are paid for with our tax dollars.
It's from weapons that are paid for with our tax dollars. That's true. But what started the conflagration that we're in right now.
1948.
Okay. Well, thank you. We are going to agree. We will disagree on this tonight.
So
I appreciate your advocacy. I'll have to take a look at it. Thank you for asking. What's the next question?
Does America have a moral conscience anymore?
I think
How do you go to work when there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinians dying over and over again?
I think-
How do you morally support that kind of outrage?
Thank you.
That's what I want.
Thank you.
It's good to have lots of voices heard, Liz. Thank you, Senator Bennet, for being
Thank
here.
you.
My name's Elfigo Gomez. And recently, our Colorado Congressman, Jason Crow, talked about the partisan divide that we're seeing in our country, and he categorized it as really it's a matter of the people that take a shower in the morning or the people that take a shower in the evening. It was an interesting thought there around that. And I think we look around this room and all of us care about this country and certainly care about having a two-party system. And certainly Democrats have lost that cultural battle, I think. How do we switch it back? How do we, a lot of gray hairs in here. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know how much diversity we really have in this room, but we all care.
Yeah.
And I think somehow we've lost that working class or whatever. There's been a loss of certainly people of color moving away. So how do we get it back?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I want to say to the person who yelled in the back, I appreciate what you said about moral conscience. Thank you. I just want to say I appreciate that. And I think that's how we should be thinking about what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Ukraine as well, what's going on in this nation. And we're never going to agree on everything. We're never going to agree on everything. But I do think that's the right prism to be looking at it. And that's the prism that I try to look at it. And I appreciate your being here to ask the question that you asked. I really do. I really do. And on Jason's point, first of all, he's one of the best members of Congress, period. I don't mean just in Colorado, anywhere. The guy is incredible, and I think he's right about that. And you can see it in the numbers. You see this huge separation politically in America on this spectrum of education, where we see a political division as our country kind of grows apart based on what the education is that people are receiving. And the Democratic Party, I think, has been very unresponsive to the concerns and worries of working people in the United States. We might have the rhetoric, but we haven't really delivered very much for a long time. This is one of the reasons why I have fought so hard to dramatically change the child tax credit in America. We, during the COVID years, with Biden's help, some of you may remember, well, you won't remember, I ran a totally unnoticeable campaign for president, but it's true. It's true. It was painful because when I called my mom, I mentioned her earlier, and I said, I'm running for president. She said, do we really need one more person in this race? That was her question. And I tell my friend, Cory Booker from New Jersey, who got in at about the same time I did, somehow my mom never asked about him the same way. He's totally fine. But I ran for that because I had been a school superintendent. I had figured out that if we changed the child tax credit, that we could dramatically reduce childhood poverty in America. And we did pass that as part of the Biden COVID years. And for a moment, we literally cut childhood poverty in America in half. in half. And it gives you a sense of what is actually possible if we're willing to pull some big levers. I was with some steel workers today in Pueblo, who work at the plant there, who are very worried about the way the intersection of environmental regulations are potentially compromising their ability to have their decent paying union jobs in Pueblo, Colorado. We should be listening to that conversation to understand, how we could draft things better so that we actually were supporting the work that they're doing here with their hands. We had a conversation already tonight that I won't repeat, but you could get the impression based on the college loan forgiveness policies of the Biden administration that their priority was people that had a college degree, instead of figuring out how to get people that don't have a college degree into a place where they can earn a living wage and support a family, which is what I think the Democratic Party should stand for. So I agree with you. That's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning tonight, and I think that unless we're willing to go down the road that you described, we're going to continue to not have the success that we should have at the ballot box. And that would be a shame for our country, because I think we have a lot to offer if we could get our act together. Oh, and by the way, on the point of grayness, let's all figure out how to bring young people into this conversation. We have to do that. We have to do that. I'm not gray, but I'm getting old, so I know that. John?
Next two questions are going to be 1929, 1929, and 1951. 1951.
Thank you, Senator Bennet, for holding this for all of us to come and express our concerns with everything that's going on. I guess mine is probably maybe not a question you can really answer. It's more of an observation that it's very frustrating that Donald Trump is signing executive orders left and right in every which direction. And we seem to be on a back foot trying to go forward and talk to judges and have our cases and have them say, yeah, he can't do that, he can't do that. But what's even more frustrating is that when the judges do rule, no, he needs to bring the workers back. No, he can't do that. He still does it. So I guess, as I said, I don't know that you can really answer it, but at some point there has to be a way that the judicial system can do what it's supposed to do, and it can be no. He can't govern that way. He can't do these things to these people in our country and everything else. Somebody, I mean, where's the enforcement? What are we going to do?
Exactly. I think this is a question. Where did you go? Right there. I think you've put your finger on something that is really deeply concerning to everybody. It's deeply concerning to me. And I've been thinking a lot about it. I mean, one group of people that would not be surprised by the appearance of Donald Trump are the people that wrote the Constitution of the United States. I mean that. I really mean that. They had a fairly dim view of human nature, and some of that might have been because some of them, had some problematic human natures of their own, but they had in their mind, really the fall of the Roman Republic when they were writing the Constitution, and they wrote this series of democratic, institutions. That's what they created: the checks and balances, the independent judiciary, the the Senate and the House, bicameral legislature, a president who was limited, in the term that he could serve. I mean, all of those things were ways of trying to control somebody just like Donald Trump, honestly. In their minds, they knew the history even better than we do today. We've sort of forgotten it. But in some minds, somebody who had kind of lost all, who didn't care at all about convention, who didn't care at all about tradition, and was turning their armies on Rome, literally. And that was the collapse, basically. And they would be shocked to know that we made it 230 years, I can assure you. They'd be shocked that we're not a slave-holding society anymore in the United States of America, because obviously we were when they wrote the Constitution. And I think our institutions are being challenged right now in ways they haven't been in generations. It doesn't mean they've never been, but they haven't been in generations. And we are going to have to push back on it. That's what we're going to have to do. It's hard. It's difficult because the president won the presidency. The president won a majority in the Senate. The president won a majority in the House of Representatives. I say that not to make excuses. I just say that because that's the reality of the situation. And we should feel, I think, some level of momentary, I don't want to choose the word, right, relief, just a momentary relief, that the Chief Justice of the United States 2 days ago was willing to stand up and say, you can't say that about judges in America. You can't say that about judges in America. That our disagreement over a judicial opinion is not grounds for impeachment. Obviously, you shouldn't have to say it, but nobody has had Donald Trump as their president for a very long time. So I'm glad the Chief Justice said what he did. I'm glad the judges that have said DOJ shouldn't be crawling all over our personal information at the Treasury have done that. I'm glad they've said what Trump did with USAID was wrong. This is important. I am not here to tell you that he's necessarily going to obey what they do. We don't know that. We don't know the answer to that. But it is very important for us as citizens of this country to be pushing back on this. And you say, how? You're here tonight to have this conversation. You're going to be in your local city councils and local school boards where you can push back on the stuff that they're doing that affect your communities. You could, if you wanted to, I'm not saying you should, this isn't a fundraiser tonight, contribute to the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin where Elon Musk is on the other side tonight. There are going to be lawsuits that are brought on behalf of the federal employees who are being fired. They probably could use financial support in those lawsuits. And I would say also, and we have to push hard. I am grateful for those of you that called me up after my, interaction with Bobby Kennedy and said, thank you for what you did there. Or Tulsi Gabbard, thank you for what you did. I'm also grateful for people that say, you're not doing enough, you got to do more. Or for people who say, we have a different moral view about the situation in the Middle East. That's really, really important, and I think it's particularly important at moments like this. My heart as a lawyer was broken 2 weekends ago when I opened up the newspaper and there was an article there about the most prominent law firms in America, the most prominent law firms in America who are worried that if they take cases that the administration will take retribution on them. That is a dangerous moment in America. It's a dangerous moment in America when Jeff Bezos destroys the Washington Post editorial pages as well. So this is what we are going to have to push back on. And I will gladly, where I see opportunities, I will let you know. And where you see opportunities where you think I can fight harder, I want you to let me know. Because it is the only way that we're going to be able to. All right, I said it. Thank you. I appreciate it. I knew you were going to say it, and I'll take it. Yes, thank you.
Well, this is Terry Andrews, and my husband and I came all the way from Chaffee County. So first of all, we want to thank you for your years of service and what you're trying to do. We're all frustrated. I keep thinking of Barack Obama. We need a social organizer. There is so much anger, frustration, and willingness to take action in all of us, and we need people to tell us what to do. And one thing I know, you probably all know it, April 5th, get out there, we gotta have numbers. I'm disappointed that not every seat in this auditorium is full and people are standing on the sides. Tell your friends, I think it's gonna be the people that take back our government from Trump.
I do too. I do too. Thank you for coming from Chaffee County. Grateful that you're here. Who's the next person? Or are we, John, are we?
2 more tickets, and I think these might be our last 2. First question is going to be...
Who said we can go all night? I just want to know who that is. I'm conscious of the fact that people probably have kids at home or they have... No? Okay. Maybe your kids don't want you to come home. Maybe it's like my house. Can we do 15 more minutes? Should we do that? And okay.
First question is going to be 2067. That's 2067. Second question is going to be 1862. 1862.
I'm a younger person and would love to have a voice.
Okay. Okay.
Hi.
Hi there.
Is it on? My name is Susan Garso. I'm a retired teacher. My father was the minority whip of the Maine legislature.
Say it
My
again.
father was the minority whip of the Maine legislature.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up in a house where we talked about everything and fought about everything.
Yeah.
And I want to thank the people who came and yelled tonight. I think it's really important that we don't squash that and that we still got to carry on and talk with each other. So I thank you all for the passion and the caring of what's going on. This is what we have to do. We have to call, we have to write, we have to gather, and here's what I do. I have little pieces of paper that tell people how to register to vote. I take them with me to every shopping excursion. I ask every person, are you registered? If they are not, I give them the paper, which I've seen be thrown in the trash, but we have to keep it up. So that's my message.
Yeah.
Here's my question.
Yes.
What do you all talk about in terms of stopping this?
So let me, on the first point, excuse me, on the first point, let me say, I sometimes have people say to me that the system is so, when I say, we should vote or go out and vote, or people say sometimes, the system is so corrupt, I'm not going to vote. People do say that. And here's what I would ask of all of you. Please think, sometimes it sounds self-serving when a politician says vote, because they think that you're saying, vote for me in the next election, or vote for... The more corrupt you think it is, the more you should vote. The more you should get 10 or 20 or 30 or 100 other people to vote. Because if you don't, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is more true when you're living in a society when the vote is being suppressed as it is today. And when people ask, what can we do? What can we do? I just want to underscore what you said, because I do think it is so important. when you think about, I have conversations with people all the time, young people that come into my office, you know, in DC, and we have a conversation often when they come there about, they've been to see the statue, or not the Statue of Liberty, that's in New York. They've been to see the Washington Monument or the Supreme Court and the Capitol building by the time they get to my office. And there's kind of a tendency, even among the parents, to kind of think that all that stuff was just there, you know? And we have a conversation while they're there about how the building I work in was built by enslaved human beings. And that there's a story that to be told about our country, which is a battle that's gone back to the very beginning between the highest ideals that have ever been written on the page, which are the institutions that we're talking about, you know, the words in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence on the one hand, and the worst impulses in human history on the other hand, in our case, human slavery. And I say to people, that's not some woke history of America, that is the history of America. That's the story that we're telling and that we're fighting toward. And under circumstances where the democracy is under stress, one of the most important things we can do is vote and make sure other people vote. It's really, really true. And you think about John Lewis sacrificing his skull on the Edmund Pettus Bridge for our democracy. He wasn't doing that for John Lewis. He was doing that for our democracy. And he wasn't doing it because somebody told him to do it. He was doing it because he thought that was what needed to be done in the moment for our democracy. That's what we're figuring out. And the question that you asked about what are you debating about back there, there is a debate. You know, I think that in the Senate, just to be honest about it, I think last week there may not have been consensus about many things except for how poorly we had laid out the stakes for the American people in the debate that we're having. And that's something we have to address, you know. And so I believe very, very strongly that the fight that we're about to have around Medicaid, the fight we're about to have, you know, to have something more imaginative in our tax code, like having the child tax credit that cuts childhood poverty in half versus Elon Musk being able to give his stock tax-free to the next generation of, you know, Elon Musk. I don't know. I just came up with that. I just came up with that. You know, that is a place where there's going to have to be clarity. And I know there's a debate here about whether we should go after, and when I say we, I mean all of us. I'm not, whether we should go after every single thing, you know, or whether or not we have to strategically figure out where the battle is. There are days, I'll say this, I don't necessarily, I'm sure there will be people here that will disagree. There are days when I feel like we're fighting a wildfire from behind. You know, you can't fight a wildfire from behind. Any firefighter will tell you, you have to find the fire break. You've got to find the river. You've got to find the place where those brave federal employees have put that fire break so that the fire can be stopped. And that is a question of, like, is it every 10 minutes going on the cable and talking about it? Or is it figuring out where the real battles are and having fights, you know, on that? You can tell what my bias is, but I don't expect that everybody's going to agree with me on it. We've got to figure it out. That's what we have to figure out. And that's what we're having a debate about. That is true what we're having a debate about. Great. I will. I do, I think, and I will. Yes, yes, yes. Can we have somebody in the back row? And I am, with your indulgence, I am going to go to the young person who's okay. So let me. Shall we? We'll have an intermission where we go to you. Please go ahead. Max, do you have a microphone over here? They're.
Teacher. Okay.
What?
I am a former.
Wait, you're not that young.
I'm 33. Okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Henson. I'm a former District 2 teacher. I left the classroom in 2023 for numerous reasons. I don't know if your mom sent you an article today about, sorry, it
That's
sounds
good.
really loud right here. I don't know if your mom sent you the article today about teachers protesting with what Governor Polis is doing, wanting to pull funds from crucial acts that are going to pull $15 million from districts. What are the Democrats doing in action plans, not just words? What are the Democrats doing in order, actually, hold on, so it's more concise. Let me pull out my question. What are concrete actions that the Democrats are doing in Colorado that are going to protect public schools, ensure stable funding, and support our teachers? Because in Colorado, we are 36% lower than college graduates for teacher pay, and that is one of the many reasons I left, because the salaries here are not sustainable, they're not livable for Colorado. So how are you Democrats, how are you guys going to support our teachers and our students? I have a child who is, I call her my child, she was my 6th grade student. She now calls me mom, and she goes to Harrison High School, and I am afraid for her future because of the funding that is being pulled. You have representatives like Jeff Crank, who I think is alive, I don't know, because he refuses to show his face, that want to lie and continue saying that he wants more power for the teachers in the districts. They already have that power. Districts can already do the per pupil, the funding, teacher pay, curriculum. Parents just have to be involved, and that is their fault if they're not. So what are the Democrats in Colorado that are fighting against a Jeff Crank or a Gabe Evans or Jeff Hurd, who are MAGA and they're Trumpers? I'm gonna calm myself there. What would you guys as Democrats do to ensure that our students are being funded, our teachers are being paid, so we don't continue? D2 had to take teachers from the Philippines because they had the highest amount of teachers quitting in the city. So what are we going to do? What are you guys going to do as Democrats to fight against that, to give us public funding that are going to allow students in Title I schools to succeed with this whole dismantling of education?
Thank you for the question. So I know you asked about Colorado, but let me first say, as a nation, we are still running a system of education that imagines that we have a labor market that discriminates against women, which it did, and that women had 2 professional choices. One is being a nurse and one is being a teacher. And that we can hire you to come teach at a very low wage because we're discriminating against you and you can't go do anything else. That is the system, the entire system of employing teachers was born in that labor market, and we've done nothing to change it. I think it's a miracle that anybody's willing to teach. And particularly in Colorado, where our funding is as low as it is because of the constitutional constraints that we have on our state, that we've got to, we're going to have to find a way of addressing, because there are urban and rural school districts all over this state that can't hire the bare complement of teachers that we need for kids to be able to get the bare minimum education, much less education that's actually competitive with countries all over the world. And I don't think there will be a way of doing that without addressing the serious budget shortfalls that this state has today. Right.
The answer, what Governor Polis is trying to do, is take $15 million from school districts. Is that the answer?
I haven't been able to look at what he's doing, but I will say that we are, without making a judgment about what he's doing, I will say that the fact that our state budget is in a $1.2 billion deficit when we are not in a recession tells you we have a serious problem in our hand. And when we are paying teachers as little as we are, partly as a result of that, we have a serious problem on our hands that we're going to have to find a way to address. And by the way, in the end, it's not going to just be Democrats. It's going to have to be Colorado. We are going to have to decide that, you know, there is no reason why this state shouldn't be the best place in America to go to school and to teach. But we're a long way from that today.
Jeff Hurd or Gabe Evans, who are part of the people making this decision. What would you say
I
for
tell
them?
you to go. Let's keep going. Even I have a. Yes.
We've got.
Is there anybody in the back row who's going to?
We've got a question that we already called a ticket for.
Sorry, you're in the next.
So my question concerns Democrats are in the minority in the House and the Senate, and perhaps one way to get some power is to appeal to Republicans in the House and the Senate to their faithfulness to the Constitution and all the other things that we all believe in, and understanding that they will need political cover to be able to defect from Trump's agenda. So is there any way for you or for us to encourage Republicans in Congress to, with a minimum number, speak up and be faithful to the Constitution? Is that possible?
Yeah, look, let me say this. I mentioned earlier the Pete Hegseth example, right? Where everybody said, "Don't these people have, you know, haven't they sworn an oath to the Constitution? How can you put?" And the answer is, in that instance, I think they failed their duty. I think they did. On the other hand, I was on the floor last week with 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans on the Ukraine question we were talking about earlier. And all of us were speaking about the important role that America plays. They were out there taking a different point of view from President Trump on this issue, which, by the way, almost any, I'm not even going to say it, a different point of view from President Trump on that. And I was there to try to encourage them in that. You know, that should seem obvious. It seems to me, to anybody who understands, you know, the nature of the post-World War II order and America's role in it. But it was a rare circumstance where there were actually people on the floor on the Republican side willing to do it. I'm not expecting to see much more of that, but I hope we will see more of that. I do think that we need to fight on this Medicaid question. And you know, and Republicans need to hear from you about what the cuts to Medicaid are going to do to this community and to people in this community. And the same thing with their plan to give tax cuts to the richest people in the country and borrow it from everybody else. And you may be right. You may be right that they don't care. You might be right about that. But that's only going to make our argument more ferocious on the back end of it if they go along with it. I mean, their tax policy is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. If the mayor of any town in Colorado, I don't care, any Democratic or Republican town in Colorado, if their plan was to go out and borrow more money than had ever been borrowed in this history of the town before, and you said to them, that makes me nervous, what are you going to spend the money on, right? And you said, are you spending it on parks? And the answer was no. Are you spending it on schools? No. Mental health? No. Water? No. Energy? No. Infrastructure? No. Veterans? Are you spending on veterans? No. What are you spending it on? We're going to give it to the 2 richest neighborhoods in town and let it trickle down to everybody else. That is the Republican tax policy. And we should be pushing back on it today. That's what they're going to do. Are they going to change their mind about it? I doubt it very much. Is that a place where we can come together as Americans in a new political framework? I think it is. I think it is. And I think we got to fight through it. Where there are people, I went out of my way tonight to say, thank you very much, Chief Justice, for what you said about the courts. And where there are opportunities to do that, I think we should do that. Because in the end, we want to reinforce the democratic norms that we're all here tonight to support. You sound like you've had enough. Let me take
We
two
have
more.
2 more.
2 more, and then I gotta go. And you gotta go. You gotta go. You're not that young either.
Our
What?
last two questions will be 2034, 2034, and 1821. 1821.
Thank you, Senator Bennet, for being here tonight.
Thanks for being here yourself.
Yes. It seems like the Democrats are playing whack-a-mole with everything that comes up, and all of us are playing whack-a-mole, contacting you and all of our other senators and representatives. Where is the discussion, and who is having the discussion to create a comprehensive plan to combat this? We're always on the defensive. We must be on the offense.
I agree.
Project 2025 was started back in the 50s. Nobody's addressing that. And here they are making it all come to pass. And I don't see a comprehensive plan or a group of people making a comprehensive
You're
plan.
right about that. You're absolutely right about that. And we need to have our equivalent of that. Not of 2025, but you know, this goes back a long way to the trickle-down economics we were talking about at the very beginning tonight that Ronald Reagan started, to Robert Bork's antitrust policies, to the notion that somehow the only thing we would consider about the health of our economy or of our system was how shareholders felt about it rather than how the rest of the American people felt about it. You know, a world where our trade policies undermined the people that I met with today who work at the steel plant in Pueblo, for example, for the advantage of the shareholders as well. And there was a whole structure of the Federalist Society and academic institutions and think tanks and all that stuff that all came together in support of that, an apparatus that came together in support of that. I agree with my friend over here that Donald Trump was almost like the accidental beneficiary of all that and the stuff in 2025. And I actually share your view that that is a project that we've got to figure out how to be engaged in. It's not going to happen tonight. It's not going to. We could start it right here, I suppose, but it is necessary and it is essential for us.
Hi, thank you for this evening, and thanks to everybody else who's here too.
Thank you, everybody.
2 things. One thing with what was mentioned earlier about the executive orders and stuff, that's how do we change it, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's like all these things are like unconstitutional. I keep hearing they're unconstitutional. So how can they continue to keep doing it and changing all these things? I just don't understand. Maybe I'm too naive or not smart enough or something, but it's like if it's unconstitutional and these judges should have a chance to do something, then why is this even a discussion that like they're not getting squashed? And you know, Justice Roberts finally did say something, but it's like, holy cow, it's like, what is taking so long? And then the other thing is, it's just abhorrent, and everything is abhorrent what's going on, but taking, for the DEI and purging names and taking away history, and I am white, but it's just like, it's taking away our history. This is ridiculous that they can take names off of registers because of their race, because they're female, gender, whatever. I just don't get it, and I don't know what you can say about that in terms of like constitutional and just what's right and why they can continue to do this. And I kept hearing that from people like why, like, and how, and anyway, I thank you for trying to answer that, and thank you for listening.
Well, I think that's a great way to end. I regret this. I'll get you at the end. Can I just, Thank you. Well, go ahead. I wasn't actually going to call on you, but I will, because you've been so, go ahead, and then I'm going to answer your, and then we'll end on this. I know, I've been beaten. You do whatever you need to do.
Thank you very much for taking my question. I'll keep it to 2 minutes. The 2020 National Defense Authorization Act.
Give him a mic. Give him a mic.
You answered the other question.
Here he goes.
Where did you go over here? I just want to, okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking my question. I'll keep it to 2 minutes. The 2020 National Defense Authorization Act states, quote, "It is the sense of Congress that, one, despite sustained efforts by Congress and the executive branch, an unacceptable backlog in processing and adjudicating security clearances persists, both within elements of the intelligence community and in other departments of the federal government, with some processing times exceeding a year or even more. Two, the protracted clearance timetable threatens the ability of elements of the intelligence community to hire and retain highly qualified individuals and thus to fulfill the missions of such elements. Three, the prospect of a lengthy clearance process deters some such individuals from seeking employment with the intelligence community in the first place, and when faced with a long wait time, those with conditional offers of employment may opt to discontinue the security clearance process and pursue different opportunities. Four, now more than ever, therefore, the broken security clearance process badly needs fundamental reform." And I'll just read you something much briefer from the 2023 NDAA, which states that the heads of the elements of the intelligence community shall, quote, "take all such actions each head considers appropriate and necessary to ensure that by December 31st, 2023, the median duration of the onboard period for new employees at each element of the intelligence community is equal to less than 180 days, end quote. And the time is measured starting from when the candidate applies for the job. People often have to wait very long times, sometimes more than 3 years, and even then, they can be told that the position is no longer being filled. I had to wait 562 days, which is more than 3 times that 180 median, just to be told that the position is no longer available. While I'm not privy to the data on recent processing times, I believe the median is way over 180 days at some agencies, so the law has been broken. As a member of the Intelligence Committee, what are you going to do to ensure that victims of this violation of law, such as myself, receive justice?
Thank you. So first, okay. Thank you, and I want to apologize for going out of order, but sometimes there's just, someone is persistent enough that you just can't. Hey, Pat, let me first of all, if you want to give Pat your contact information just on your case, we can try to figure it out. But I totally agree. As a member of the Intelligence Committee, it's ridiculous how long it takes to go through the background stuff, which is not to say that the background stuff isn't important, although they seem not to think it's very important, but we should be doing it in a much more expeditious way. I'll ask you also, while I have you, since you raised this, can you imagine, we've been, had all this anti-diversity stuff that's coming, and in terms of the federal workforce and all this. I ask you, El Paso County, could you imagine why the Central Intelligence Agency, just as an example, might actually want to have a diverse workforce, to have people that can work in other countries without being detected? And it's the level of, anyway, I will work with you on that. And we have to fix it, we have to reform it. Yes, I'm gonna end here. Also, my friend in the front row, we do, who's mentioned Social Security, that's really, a solemn trust, and it is a moral commitment this country has made. We have to make sure that we protect it in this moment. None of the math adds up here, you know, from all the stuff they say they're going to cut. And then they say, we'll take it out of discretionary spending, or we'll take it out of Medicaid, and you got to watch it, because it really doesn't add up, and we're going to have to push back. This issue of our history is really, really important. I talked a little bit about it tonight. I'm not going to repeat that story, that American story. But apparently now we can't even celebrate the Iwo Jima monument because or the code talkers because of that. When I was running the last time for office, and by the way, thanks for giving me the chance to be your senator. I really appreciate that opportunity. But when I was running the last time, I was telling the story about Camp Hale. Some of you might know about Camp Hale. And I had been fighting to get the Biden administration to make it what turned out to be their first national monument of the Biden administration was Camp Hale here in Colorado. And my campaign team said, don't let Biden come out here, you know. By the way, I forgot to mention, thank you, Joe Biden, for the infrastructure bill. Thank you for the climate bill. But they were saying, you know, his numbers aren't so good, he shouldn't come out. And I was saying, well, the veterans who have been fighting to have Camp Hale protected deserve to have the President of the United States here. And he came out here. He did an incredible job. He did an amazing job while he was here. And I would tell people about the 10th Mountain Division and how they had been people from all over America who had come there. Some of the greatest skiers in America, the greatest mountain climbers, people who had never seen snow before, who came and for 3 years trained in the mountains of Colorado. And when they were done with that training, and when the moment was right, they were sent over to the mountains of northern Italy, where they pushed the Nazis out of their mountaintop, you know, defenses, places the Nazis in a million years never thought that anybody could reach. Because of the training they had here in our beautiful mountains, they were able to do it. And by the way, and they had huge casualties in doing this, huge casualties. And that wasn't even enough for them, because these people came back and created our outdoor rec industry here. They founded our ski resorts here in Colorado. But as I was traveling the state, I was also thinking about another camp that Joe Neguse and I were trying to make part of the National Park Service. And that was a camp that was established in Colorado at exactly the same moment Camp Hale was established. And that was Camp Amache, that is on the eastern plains of Colorado, where 11,000 Japanese Americans were incarcerated for no reason other than race hatred, as our governor at the time described it. Same war, same fight against fascism, same patriotic impulse. And in one place, you know, we were training people to go push the Nazis out. In the other place, we were incarcerating people behind barbed wire. And by the way, there were huge disputes in that camp and in all the camps. Some people, their relatives actually went and signed up to serve in the military to fight fascism in Europe, even while their parents were locked behind that barbed wire. And other people said, I'm not going to fight, you know, while my parents are locked up behind barbed wire. There's an incredible valedictorian address by a student who was in Camp Amache, who it's often read as kind of a saccharine view that even though you're locking us up here, we still believe in American values and American principles. I read it very differently. I read it to say that as long as I'm here, America can't possibly fulfill those highest ideals that I talked about earlier. It's impossible. And therefore, I know I won't be here. Therefore, I know you're going to unmake this terrible mistake. And what I've been spending a lot of time thinking about lately, as the Trump administration has been making it impossible for people to find out on any website that Japanese Americans fought in World War II, even while their parents were locked up there. are the people who fought, in that case, Franklin Roosevelt, and said, you shouldn't lock people up here. Because when you think about it, that's really the highest standard of citizenship that we could ask for. That's the same citizenship that John Lewis showed on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It's a level of citizenship that we have when we vote, and when we make sure other people vote, and when we make sure we don't tolerate the threats to our society that we are facing right now. But we would be wrong to think this is the first time this has happened in American history. You know, we have had reactionary periods in the past, and every time we've had one, it's been followed by a progressive era in the United States of America. And it's because even as they've tried to, even as people have ignored what the courts have said or pushed back on what they said, in the end, democracy has prevailed. And it's prevailed because people have been willing to show up in ways that have been noticed by history and in ways that are completely unnoticed by history. And that's the moment that we're living in right now, I think. And part of that is standing up for the history that you're talking about. And the best way I think we can do that is by making sure the young people in Colorado understand that history, that they can read the history of John Lewis, read the history of the families that were locked up on the Eastern Plains, but also of the 10th Mountain Division as well. I'll finish just by saying, for years and years and years, I've told the story of when young people come to my office in Colorado, Frederick Douglass, who was born a slave in Maryland, in the United States, obviously in Maryland. It's getting late. And he escaped and went to Massachusetts, and he joined the abolitionist movement. There were fraught relationships all throughout, but there was a debate that went on in the abolitionist movement about how to talk about the Constitution. And what the argument was in the early days of that movement was that the Constitution was a pro-slavery document, and we have to get rid of the Constitution. And Frederick Douglass actually came to the view over years that the Constitution actually should be understood as an anti-slavery document, not as a pro-slavery document. And that the problem was we weren't living up to the words in the Constitution. Obviously, they weren't living up to the words in the Constitution at that time. But you can see the power in his claiming the ideals that were in that Constitution. And I think this is a moment where we have to claim those ideals again. We may have thought that we were out of the woods and we'd never have to do that again. That was a thought that never would have occurred to the women who were fighting for a woman's right to vote in this country. It wouldn't have occurred to the people fighting for civil rights when they were in the United States. And we're in the same battle today. And that is, and the good news is that those highest ideals are on our side, no matter what party we're in, by the way, as somebody over here said.
Why can't we, just real quick, I'm sorry, to have those high ideals, but I know what we need to do, but what about just stopping them now with all these things that are going on?
But let me ask you how you, okay, right.
But if it's a law,
right,
and it's unconstitutional, that's my question. If it's unconstitutional, why is it continuing? That's all I want.
Because I think the answer is because in many ways he's engaged in an act of his own civil disobedience, you know, and I've often wondered myself, how do these Doge guys get into the Treasury Department to begin with? How do these guys get into any of these agencies? And how is it even possible that we could have a president that was ignoring judicial, and the answer to the question is that in the end, The restraining force is the citizens of this country. That's what we're going to have to do. That's what we're going to have to do, and that's what I think we will do. And I don't think we can count on Donald Trump to restrain himself. I know that's not what you're saying.
The leaders of the Indivisible movement here just come here.
Great.
Afterwards.
Good. Great. And so put your hand up so people can see that you're here. We've now, I can't even tell what time it is. Listen, El Paso County, thank you for caring about our country. Thank you for caring about our democracy. Thank you for being here tonight. I am more grateful than you could know. Let's go get them. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Yeah. I don't think so.
Turn that mic off.